Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Listen Up Girl podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randles-Friedman. Today's episode is going to be a little different. It isn't just a news roundup. This is a moment in time episode, a look back at 2025, a year that tested LGBTQ plus community, challenged our rights, exhausted our spirits, and still somehow proved that we are not going anywhere. Because if 2025 taught us anything, it's this. Progress isn't linear. Its resistance is resilience. So today we're breaking down the 5 biggest stories that shaped our lives this year, why they mattered, and what they told us about where we're headed next. So take a breath and let's get into it. Let's start with the story that quietly terrified us a lot. Marriage equality. It survives for now. In 2025, the Supreme Court was once again asked to take up the challenge that could have reopened the door to dismantling marriage equality. This time it came through a renewed legal effort tied to Kim Davis, the Kentucky clerk who famously refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples back in 2015. For weeks, LGBTQ plus legal experts, activists, and everyday couples were watching closely. But let's be honest, after Roe was overturned, no ruling feels untouchable anymore. But then it happened. The Supreme Court declined to hear the case. No dramatic press conference, no sweeping reaffirmation of queer love, just a quiet refusal. And while that may not feel like a win, in 2025 it absolutely was. Because what this decision really signaled was that, at least for now, the court wasn't ready to reopen the floodgates on undoing same-sex marriage nationwide. Still, and this is important, the fear didn't disappear. Many states have continued passing laws that test the edges of Obergefell, particularly around religious exemptions and recognition loopholes. So yes, marriage equality survived 2025, but it did not feel secure. And that tension, celebration mixed with dread, defined much of the year. We also had trans lives at the center of a political storm. If there was one group that carried the heaviest burden in 2025, it was the transgender community. This year saw an aggressive escalation of anti-trans legislation across the country, and particularly targeting trans youth, school participation, bathroom access, and gender-affirming healthcare. We watched as trans kids were turned into political talking points, as families were forced to choose between safety and relocation, as educators and allies were threatened for simply following state law and protecting students. One story stood out that involved a Michigan school where a trans student became the focus of a national media frenzy despite doing nothing wrong. Her existence alone sparked complaints, investigations, and relentless online harassment. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, something remarkable happened. School administrators stood their ground, parents spoke up, and LGBTQ plus allies flooded the conversation with compassion instead of cruelty. 2025 showed up for both sides of America. One side weaponized fear, the other side chose humanity. And if there's one truth we must keep repeating, trans lives are not a debate. They are not hypothetical. They are not political experiments. They are real people deserving of dignity, safety, and joy. Then LGBTQ representation made history. While national politics felt bleak, local elections in 2025 quietly told a different story. Across the country, LGBTQ plus candidates won historic victories, especially in cities and towns where representation once felt impossible. One of the most talked about wins was Freddie Puzza, elected as the first openly LGBTQ plus mayor of Culver City, California. This wasn't just a symbolic win, it represented a broader trend we saw throughout the year. Queer candidates, not just because they were LGBTQ plus, but because voters trusted their leadership. School boards, city councils, mayor offices, these victories mattered because they reminded us of visibility paired with competence is powerful. And at the time when national rhetoric tried to erase us, local voters said, "We see you and we choose you." That's not nothing. That's the long game. Then queer culture thrives even in chaos. Now let's talk about something lighter, but no less important, because even in the middle of political chaos, queer culture in 2025 thrived. One of the biggest media moments of the year came from Apple TV, when Plurus, a sci-fi drama featuring a lesbian lead, became the platform's most watched series ever. No disclaimers, no issues-based marketing, just a queer character existing in a mainstream story, and audiences showing up in massive numbers. Beyond TV, we saw viral trans joy stories, queer artists topping charts, LGBTQ plus creators reclaiming platforms once hostile to them. And let's be clear, this wasn't escapism. It was resistance. Because joy is political when the world wants you erased. Every laugh, every love story, every queer-centered success in 2025 sent the same message. We're not shrinking ourselves to survive. We are expanding. And then backlash, misinformation, and culture wars. Of course, no year like 2025 comes without pushback. This was the year we saw misinformation weaponized at scale, particularly through conservative media outlets that publish misleading or outright false stories about LGBTQ plus people. From false claims about schools to fear-based narratives around drag, healthcare, and pride events. The culture war machine was running at full speed. We also saw anti-discrimination measures narrowly defeated at the ballot box, libraries and schools pressured to remove queer content, public officials using LGBTQ life to score political points. But here's what changed in 2025. People pushed back faster. Fact-checking spread quicker. Allies spoke louder. And queer voices refused to stay quiet. Backlash still existed, but it didn't control the entire narrative anymore. And that shift matters. So what did this year actually teach us? It taught us that rights can survive, but only if we stay vigilant. Visibility without protection is dangerous. Representation changes lives. Culture can move hearts faster than courts, and silence is never neutral. 2025 was exhausting, but it was also clarifying. It reminded us that the fight isn't over and that it never really is. But before I go, I want to say directly to you, the listener, if you made it through 2025 feeling tired, angry, hopeful, proud, or above all, you're not broken, you're paying attention. And paying attention is an act of love. Thank you for listening, and thank you for caring, and thank you for showing up, even when it's hard. That's been Listen Up, Girl. I'm Zach Randles-Friedman, and until next time, stay loud, stay kind, and never stop telling the truth.